Okay, this video is going to go over inequalities specifically for polynomials and rational functions. But basically the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get everything onto one side. So like what I mean by that, I would move the 5x and the 3 and make it greater than 0. And you want to do this because now you're going to want to factor this. So like 2x plus 1, x minus 3 is greater than 0. And you want to factor it because you want to find your x-intercepts. This one would be at -1/2. This one would be at 3. So what you do is you draw a number line. And you put these things down, -1/2 and 3. So really there's like 1, 2, 3 sections of line that I'm concerned about. And I'm just going to be looking for if they're positive or if they are negative. So the way you do this is you choose a number that's within this boundary. So like for this section, I would choose 4 because 4 is to the right of 3. So you can plug in 4 to any of these equations. I would plug it into the factored, to be honest with you. And you don't really care about values. You care about positive or negative. So if I plugged in 4, it would be 2x plus 1. So 2 times 4 plus 1 would be a positive number times 4 minus 3 is 1, which is a positive number. A positive times a positive is a positive. So this section of line is positive. Next, I would choose a number that's here in this boundary. So like between -1/2 and 3. Personally, I'd choose 0. So if I plugged in 0 here, 2 times 0 plus 1 is positive. 0 minus 3 is negative. So I have a positive number times a negative number, which is going to give me a negative. Then lastly, you choose a section or a number that's in this section right here. I'd probably go with -1. So 2 times -1 plus 1 is a negative times -1 minus 3 is a negative. So a negative times negative makes a positive. So now I know at each section if it's positive or negative. So now I'm just going to go answer the question. Where is it greater than 0? Well, it's greater than 0 here and here. That's all my x values that are less than -1/2 and all my x values that are greater than 3. So this would be my answer. Okay, this next one, you're going to want to factor it fully. So if you factored this one fully, it would look like this. Now you could break this up even further and call it like x plus 2i, x minus 2i, x plus 1. But the main thing is these are going to be imaginary. So if you get any imaginaries, they don't go on the number line. So the only one here that I would put on the number line would be this -1. All right, so this one is just going to have 2 sections of line. And when you plug this in, just plug it into what's not imaginary. So I'm just plugging in numbers into only x plus 1. I'm ignoring the stuff that's imaginary. So basically, it would look like this. Find a number that's less than -1 for this section here. I'd probably go with -2. If you plugged it in to this x plus 1, you would get a negative number. And then to the right of -1, a number bigger than -1 would be like 0. If you plugged in 0 to this x plus 1, you would get a positive number. So in terms of where is it greater than 0, that would be this section here. Those are all my x values that are greater than -1. Okay, this next one, get everything to one side and factor this. You have to treat this like a difference of squares. You can go even further with this because this is a real difference of squares. I'm going to leave this x squared plus 1 alone because it's going to make imaginaries. But this other section would be x plus 1, x minus 1. So those are the only ones that get thrown on the number line, -1 and 1. And remember, when I plug stuff in, I'm just going to focus on these two. I may ignore the stuff with the imaginaries. So I'll do this section first. I would probably choose -2. If you plug that in, you would get a negative here and a negative there. So a negative times a negative makes a positive. This section, I would probably choose 0. And I'm plugging it into these two. So 0 plus 1, that's positive. 0 minus 1, that's a negative. So this is a positive times a negative, which is going to be a negative. And then this last section here, I'd probably choose like 2. So I'm plugging in 2 into this. So 2 plus 1, that's positive. 2 minus 1, that's positive. So this section is going to be a positive. So in terms of answering the actual question, where is it less than or equal to 0? That's this section right here. And since they used or equal to, I can use brackets for this because right at -1 or at 1, it's at 0. Those are zeros. So they're included in your answer. So my answer here would be bracket -1, comma 1 bracket. Okay, next up. The rationals are a little trickier. First thing you're going to want to do is factor everything still. So that'd look like this. All right. So you want to find everything, your x-intercepts, so like -5, and your vertical asymptotes, so -2 and 2. All of these things go onto the number line. So in terms of sections, how many sections I have 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now you need to know at -5, this is an x-intercept. So it totally could be 0 there. But at -2 and 2, these are vertical asymptotes. The line cannot exist there. You have to use open circles with these. Because right at that spot, there is no function. So here we go. Let's do this section first. I would probably use -6. You're plugging it into the factored form here. So on top, you would have -6 plus 5, which is -1, but then it gets squared. So it's a positive on top over, plug in -6 here. That's -6 plus 2 is negative. -6 minus 2 is negative. So it's a positive on top of a negative times a negative. So it's really like a positive on top of a positive. I hope that wasn't too confusing. This next section, I'd probably choose -3. So on top, that'd be -3 plus 5, which is 2 squared. That's a positive number. And on bottom, it'd be -3 plus 2 is negative times -3 minus 2 is a negative. So it's really like a positive on top of a positive, which would be positive. Okay, this next section here is between -2 and 2. Anytime I can use 0, I generally do. So I'll be plugging in 0 here. On top, that's going to be a positive number. On bottom, this is 0 plus 2 is positive, 0 minus 2 is negative. So it's a positive times a negative, which is going to make a positive over a negative, so negative. And then lastly would be everything greater than 2, so I'd probably choose like 3. So on top, 3 plus 5 squared, that's going to be a positive number. And on bottom, 3 plus 2 is positive, 3 minus 2 is positive. So this one's going to be positive. So in terms of where is it greater than 0, answering the actual question, it's greater than 0 here, here, and here. Now, basically, since, or greater than or equal to, sorry. Since this is a closed circle, we can count it as if there's no break in the line there. Like, since both of these sections are positive and this is a closed circle, you can call it all one section. So my first part of this answer would be everything from negative infinity to this 2 right here. I just called all this one section. And the 2 has an open circle. So I use a parentheses there. And then the other section of line would be everything here. So that's all my x values that are from like 2 to positive infinity. And since it's an open circle, I use a parentheses there. Look, it really doesn't matter if you write these as inequalities or if you write it as an interval. Your teacher might specify, but I really don't care as long as you get it correct. Okay, this last one is fully factored. So I can just go ahead and start throwing this onto the number line. So find all your points. You've got an x-intercept at 3, negative 3, and you have a VA, a vertical asymptote, at 2. So negative 3, 2, and 3. And it doesn't need to be to scale. You just need those numbers there, and you need some space. So remember, the x-intercepts can be included into the line, but the vertical asymptote cannot, so it gets the open circle. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections of line here. Let's start with this section right here. I would probably choose negative 4. Plug it in on top, you would get a negative times a negative over, plug it in on bottom, you would have a negative. So this is like a positive number over a negative number, which is going to produce a negative. Next up would be this section here. Again, anytime I can use 0, I will. So on top, that's going to be a negative times a positive over on bottom, that's a negative. So this is like a negative over a negative. So it's going to produce positives. The next one, this section right here between 2 and 3, I'd probably use like 2.5. So on top, that's going to be 2.5 minus 3 is negative, times 2.5 plus 3 is positive, over 2.5 minus 2 is a positive number. So this is really like a negative over a positive, which is going to be a negative section. Then lastly, everything bigger than 3, I'd probably choose like 4. So on top, that's going to be a positive times a positive, and on bottom, that is a positive. So this section is positive. So in terms of actually answering this question, where is it less than 0? It's less than 0 here or here. Now notice this does not have the or equal to. So you're not actually going to include those open circles. It's going to be like, those closed circles. It's going to be like they were open circles. So my answer here would be everything from negative infinity to negative 3, and everything from 2 to 3. Just like that with parentheses on everything because it's just less than. Hope that wasn't too confusing. Hope this video helped.